Move fast and break things. Remember how good that used to sound? For a while there, it seemed like technology was the answer to everything, and that business would drive us all forward. But it's time we took a look around. All around. Not just at the rooms where we sit, or the offices where we work, or the towns where we live, but all around, and ask ourselves if maybe we've broken enough. How much longer can we continue to put the few ahead of the many? How much longer can we proceed with business as usual? Let's keep moving fast. But instead of breaking things, let's find a way to fix them. Let's bring doing well and doing good together. Let's bring CEOs and NGOs together. Let's bring equal work and equal pay together. Tech and trust, shareholders and stakeholders, access and success. Let's bring value and values together. The thing is, technology really does have the power to lift us all, but only if we design it for everyone. And business really can drive us all forward, but only if we agree to hold ourselves to a higher standard. It's time for a new era of business, one that works for everyone. Let's build it together. Are you with us?
Hi, my name is Hudson, and I'm Director of Program Management at Salesforce. I've been with the company for about 4 years, but after working in advertising and marketing for over 15 years, this is the first time in my career that I can truly say I am incredibly proud to work with a company whose values closely align to my own. I'm joined today by 3 other Salesforce employees, and we're going to discuss radical inclusivity and meaningful ways of truly achieving racial equality. With that, I'm going to hand it over to my first panelist, Ms. Cristina Jones, who will introduce herself, and then the rest of the panelists will do the same. Cristina?
Hi, my name is Cristina Jones. I'm the head of customer C-suite marketing and brand partnerships. It is our job within our group to highlight stories of our customers, trailblazers, and sponsors who are influential action leaders who are passionate about Salesforce and want to share their company, product, and career success stories with us.
I am Terrence Williams, also very happy and proud to be a part of Salesforce. I've been with Salesforce a little under 3 years, and I am a lead designer on Salesforce Experience team, and we're focused on really elevating the design economy and the design ecosystem here within Salesforce, and really refining a point of view on design. And I'm very happy and excited to be here to discuss a more inclusive future.
Hello, everyone. I am Yakaira Núñez, and I go by Kai. Super jazzed to be here with all of you. Excited to talk about racial equity and equality and changing the way that our world is today with our conversation and more. I am the Senior Director of Research and Insights at Salesforce.
So with that, I'm going to dive in, and the first question is for you, Kai. And so I wanted to ask you, when have you used courage to live your values, even when you were feeling vulnerable and not the safest to fight for racial injustice?
I'm not the best public speaker. I've never been the best public speaker. And so when I was granted the opportunity to speak at Dreamforce last year in front of 8,000 people in person and millions online, I was mortified. I almost said no. I felt that I was an imposter. And I struggled through 6 weeks of arduous training that was granted to me by Salesforce, but also my colleagues that reinforced the message that it was important for me to be on stage. And I was able to execute, and I delivered the speech, and I thought I did a pretty decent job. I came off of the stage kind of mortified, beating myself up because I felt like, ever perfectionist, I wanted it to be perfect, and it wasn't. But the very next day, young African-American woman came up to me. She said, "I saw you yesterday. I saw you. I want to be you. Thank you." And so for me, that was a measure of impact. And although I beat myself up and I felt insecure and I went through all of the things that we go through, I was able to get a sense of maybe it did make a difference. It's not about me. It's about the people who see me and see examples of me.
Terrence, you've been a designer for over a decade now, and like me, you've been in the business, and probably oftentimes, as a young person of color, you're probably one of the only ones that look like you in a room. So in a word, or actually more than just a word, tell me, what does inclusive, creative, or design mean to you? And then as a follow-up to that, from your perspective, how has it changed over the last decade?
I think for me, the big differentiator between even the term of like universal design versus inclusive design is the intentionality and the purpose behind coming up with multiple solutions to a problem, or multiple approaches for many types of people in the audience, and having that lens to be very intentional about making it for a diverse audience. As you said, being one of the only people, and from undergrad to my early days in corporate, it really forced me to understand that I was always sort of looking for that mentorship, and I was looking for mentors, and I just was not seeing the type of mentorship that reflected me and my identity. I'm someone that is Black and queer, and I embrace living in that intersection. And so that was sort of my catalyst for wanting to make sure whatever I did in terms of design thinking or approach, that I could make sure that someone else wouldn't have to feel that way and feel that loneliness or isolation.
What intentional changes have you or your team, leaders at our company, taken to ensure a more inclusive workplace, inclusive advertising and marketing, and have you seen it have sort of a rippling effect at our company?
Absolutely. I think that anytime that you can lead by an example, it's worth the extra time to educate. I think, I come from a background in entertainment. My last 17 years were spent at 20th Century Fox. And I've been here now for, I guess, 2 years. But storytelling is storytelling. And in order to tell inclusive stories that are reflective of the communities in which we live and serve, you simply need to have an inclusive department. And so, it's one thing to be one of few and like C-level walking around the halls, but you move to tech and it's a very different conversation. And so you need to even be more intentional about the teams that you build. But that should not be seen as a negative. Like, that's positive. Look at the panelists today. It's a beautiful diversity of thought. It's different thinking. And beyond the diversity of thought, I think what Terrence was alluding to is the need to create an inclusive environment. The worst thing that you can do is hire for diversity and then expect everybody to behave and act and think the same way. Like, that's a fail. I also don't like when people say, they're hiring for culture. What does that mean? Again, that's a limiting space where you are now eliminating someone because they make you maybe uncomfortable because they don't look like you or they don't talk like you. But isn't that the whole point? I'm not the only purveyor of cool. So the more people I have on my team that don't look like me, but that also look like me, who are different ages, different sexual orientation, different geolocations, provides an opportunity for us to really tell the best stories I look across my team and some of the ideas they come up with, I would have never come up with in a million years, and they're incredible, and I'm proud of them. One of the first things I did when I started, we do a lot of hackathons. I want them to think outside the box. I'm not a draw in the lines type of creative. I want them to have that same freedom. And I think my team thrives on the collaboration. There's nothing worse than an idea whose time has come, but the person didn't say it, right? What ideas are out there that, we're missing because we're not creating a space of inclusion where people feel comfortable to have an opinion. And as it relates to, make change, I get to come to work every day and do what I'm passionate about. Tell stories of people who are change agents, who are not just innovating for themselves, but innovating and then reaching back and making sure that they're bringing everybody along with them. Creating seats at the table. I look at us on this call, there's a lot of leaders on this call. What are we doing? Are we all making sure that then we turn around and make sure that our voices are heard and that we create space for other people to be at the same table? That means that we're coming from a space of abundance rather lack. We know that the more of us that are in the room, the more opportunities that we can create, the more interesting stories, technology, designs, creative, we have the opportunity to do when we work together as one team.
I love that. And I think that it's important. It's an important reminder to not just live your values and be intentional, but to also make sure that you're paying it forward. So with that, I'm gonna shift back over to Miss Kai. And Kai, I wanted to ask you, what is one thing that you would like to see changed on creative teams, whether it's in-house or outside agencies?
One thing that I've noticed in creative industries across the board and all the creative teams that I've had the pleasure of working with, that there are certain frameworks that are missing certain elements, specifically missing clear and deep commitment to drilling ethics into the way that they work, and drilling diversity and inclusion, and measuring the way that they do both within the frameworks that they use to build their products, to craft their stories, to communicate with their accounts. And so I posit that might be a great way to start. Like, what is the ethical creative framework? What might that look like? Terrence was talking about this a bit. I just wanted to double click on it so that it was really heard, right? That we need to think about how we can change the way that we create so that we can deliver against this diverse and inclusive future.
One thing, as we mentioned, just the presence of diverse perspectives in those rooms, in those decision-making scenarios, really leaning into the fact that, if you're designing for, just for example, a Black audience, there needs to be Black creators in that space, and there needs to be Black creators that are living that experience that you're trying to solve and design for. So what we're really doing is ensuring that the people in the rooms are considering everyone's experience. And it's not going to be easy. The way we get there, there has to be that empathy. And so if you have that empathy and you approach it with that lens, I think it will just help everyone consider the problem in a way where, okay, we are designing the solution for an audience, but we may have to have various different solutions for everyone to have an experience that's on an even footing. And I think moving forward, having the people in the room that have lived those experiences, and not just one person or two people, they need to be all throughout the organization at all levels. And I think that's sometimes where we trip ourselves up. We think, oh, we have this person that has a bit of this experience and we can stop there. No, it continues. It's something that's ongoing. And in terms of design, if we think about some of the injustices that have been happening in the world, someone had to design that. Someone had to come up with concepts like Jim Crow, or concepts that kind of hold certain people back in a society. So why not use design to now propel those same individuals and others forward so we can all have a happy experience, an equal experience, and an equal opportunity.
I'm really glad that you said that, because that has really been something that's been very topical and top of mind for me. And basically, that's what we're talking about. A radically inclusive future is, again, see something, say something. It's incumbent on all of us to just not let those little things slide.
I don't know if we have to say that it's a future. I think that it's now. I think that these things can happen now. That's when I, use your voice. Someone has to say, the first time I heard that, I said, well, why? It is okay to ask why. I think, again, we're in rooms. Why not ask why, so that you don't have regret? And 25 years ago, I know we were finding ourselves in a very different experience, and maybe I'm a habitual line crosser, so I've never had a problem with raising my hand to ask a question. But sometimes when you just ask them to unpack what they're thinking is, it's easy for them to see, maybe a little easier for them to see the fallacy in their thinking. It's good. It gives them an opportunity to get off the merry-go-round for a second. And that's what being intentional is. It means you take a minute if you're trying to drive change and consider what are the things that you're doing that are no longer serving you. And if you are having imposter syndrome, what are the little voices in your head that are talking to you that are old narratives that you need to just get rid of? I, like Kai, hate public speaking, but I do it for the same reason. I get feedback. It's good to see someone that looks like me up there. And, I'll keep doing it until there's a whole bunch more of us, because it should not be an exception. It should be the rule. And again, these are things that I think are simple when we talk about making change. Just do something. I get requests to speak a lot at various events. I tend to offer other people when it's me, just so that they have an opportunity to have a light shown on them. It's easy to feel unseen. The more unseen you are, the less you use your voice. We need to change that. You need to see more people. There's incredible executives in technology, in creative, in design, in the arts. Where are there? There's just not three. There's a multitude of them. So what are we doing in our jobs to raise their profile as well?
Yeah. So that's a really nice segue, Cristina. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And you were right. It's a reminder for all of us that we can find moments right now to be bold, to ask those questions. And I think what we are discovering is when you do ask those further probing questions, it falls apart really quickly. What, in your words, tell me, what is lost when we are not intentionally inclusive?
I grew up in rural Kentucky, and so I often force myself to go back in time in my mind to remember what that other side is like, because sometimes we can get in a bubble of folks that think like us and do acknowledge these things and do care about these things. And it's important to know, we're talking about diverse audiences. It's also important to know that audience, that we may not think if it's fully aligned quite yet, or doesn't quite grasp, what we're striving for fully, maybe at the surface. But I really want to put myself out there and try to reach those folks as well.
It's really hard for me to answer because I don't ever not think about being inclusive.
Right.
So maybe I'll answer it in that fashion.
Fair point.
Right. I don't have the capability of not thinking about the lens of inclusion. When I think about the other, right, which in the lens of inclusivity, I also want to think about how can I include that, because it is a different perspective. How can I consider the fact that they have a radically different disposition than I do, and I still have to create and make space and honor them?
I think what is missing is the joy, the excitement, culture differences. How boring is it to only see the same thing over and over again? A homogenous story culture, I can't think of anything that's more boring.
Yeah, so I'm going to move now back to Terrence because Terrence, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what work you're doing currently, either personal or professional, that is really energizing you right now and why.
So currently, as I mentioned, my team is really focused on elevating design and design thinking here at Salesforce. And design is such a perfect tool. Design is at the intersection of all these conversations of business, of equality, of inclusion. Um, and we need to leverage it in a very intentional way, and we need to be careful, but also not afraid to push the boundaries.
Being able to stay connected and find opportunities to collaborate and see what's next is what keeps me excited and why I keep coming to work and wanting to try new things so that we can push the envelope. But I can't push it by myself. That's where people like, Terrence, who can raise his hand and say, I'm a creative, I'm going to do something different. I'm like, well, let's go and do it. That means that you need to stay present and not always worry about like saying the wrong thing or a no. It just means you just go for it. So, my thing is, what can you do should you decide to not stay in your lane? What change can you affect?
All my friends and family learned just how proud I was of my company, even more so during this time. And to my wonderful panelists, Kai, Terrence, and Cristina, thank you for joining today's conversation.
It was an honor to join the panel. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hello, 3%. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to present this topic to you. Gendered racism, Black, female, and stressed AF. I'm Jill Frank. I am the head of creative agency operations at Allstate.
Hi, I'm Lois Castillo. I am the Associate Director of Inclusion and Engagement at Leo Burnett.
We're joined today by Dr. Heather Lofton, who's a clinical staff therapist and a teaching faculty member at the Family Institute at Northwestern University. Hello, Dr. Heather.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Ever since I've heard the term, I've been trying to speak to anyone who will listen about it. Can you tell us, let's just start there first and foremost, what is gendered racism?
Gendered racism is academically and scientifically researched and discussed as a strategic method of oppression solely experienced by racial, ethnic, and gendered minorities. And within the last 10 years or so, scholars trained in different fields of study have solidified the historical presence and harm of gendered racism and how it continues to negatively affect specifically the lives of Black women and women of color.
Just hearing the term gendered racism, I feel like there is some comfort in it, as crazy as that sounds, because I think as Black women, we know that we deal with sexism as women. We know that we deal with racism as Black people. But really, gendered racism feels like this other third thing that uniquely happens from being Black and female, right? Nobody is crossing the street out of fear that I'm gonna snatch their purse when they see me, right? That's an example of gendered racism on the male side, right, for Black men. And I think, what we're seeing in the world right now, this, overdue uprising on police brutality, and the conversation that is happening around Black Lives Matter, which is so important and is necessary, is often leaving out Black women.
I was just going to ask if you could expand on how this gender racism plays out in the workplace and in corporate America.
So in many different ways, and I'll speak more specifically to Black women, but I do want to be inclusive and honor women of color and professionals of color. But when I think about gendered racism and how it shows up in corporate America, I think about promotions. I think about who has a seat at the table versus who doesn't. Pay equity. I think about who is able to have a voice in these environments and who doesn't, and how that gets silenced. and how that speaks to or perpetuates a system that is not inclusive and not diverse.
So we wanted to make sure that we use this platform to amplify other Black female voices in advertising. Take a listen to what our colleagues, your colleagues, are saying about being Black and female in the workplace.
Unwelcoming,
stressful,
unsupported,
confusing,
uncomfortable,
isolating,
important,
imperative,
stymied,
minimized,
unique,
positive,
empowering,
blessed, code switch,
lonely,
lonely at times,
exhausting,
exhausting,
an uphill battle.
So as we start to unpack what this looks like for our industry, specifically for advertising, and for corporate America as a whole, I think it's really important to look at how gendered racism is affecting us systemically. You have 37 women who are CEOs of a Fortune 500 company. You have 4 Black people, and you have 0 Black females, which means all 4 of those CEOs are men. And so, when you look at the statistics, we are, highly educated, pursuing the most degrees.
Yeah. And, statistically shows, I can't think of the number, but most Black women are the head of their household, and we're the least and we're the lowest paid. Off of the census data. We are paid less than our white female counterparts.
Which is already less than the white men.
Yeah.
And so, just highlighting how many different hats and identities Black women position themselves in or have to be positioned in. Parenting, partnering, professionalism, and caregiving is something to consider as we're honoring everything that we have to do in order to get to the table.
Not to mention our health. We're more likely to die in childbirth. We're more likely to get COVID, not be believed by doctors. There's a battle and a war that we are waging just simply by existing.
We have taught ourselves it's a sign of weakness to take care of ourselves. It's always about taking care of everyone else, even fixing food. And historically, we eat last. We fix everyone else's plate. And I think that is just a small representation of how we are just nurtured and brought up in this taking care of others before yourself.
And let's not forget slavery. What was the role of a female enslaved person but to caregive? I was just reading about Aunt Jemima, and the whole, retiring of the brand and the history behind that character is the happy house slave who loves to make the pancakes, who doesn't complain, and who, is in service of others, right? And I think that the over mothering, the over sexualization, the idea that, and any woman will know that feeling intimately of being an accessory or a prop to men. But I think when you add the layer of racism and institutionalized racism and systemic racism in this country, there is a lot to unpack there. So, Dr. Heather, could you tell me a bit more about the concept of the strong Black woman?
Yes, to be honest, that construct is quite beautiful because the development of the strong Black woman schema is protective. In many different ways, Black women have endured these stressors of racism, sexism, and many different forms of oppression, and we have prevailed or tried to maintain a triumphant experience of struggles that have been placed onto our lives. And the strong Black woman schema has transitioned through time, dating back to slavery and its development, but transitioned through time, now showing up differently. Now the strong Black woman schema does kind of create this experience of psychological desensitization to stress. And as we're talking about gendered racism in corporate America, stress is a part of that experience. So as I'm listening to you all talk about your understanding about gendered racism and how it's shown up in your lives and in colleagues' lives, I would like to hear a little bit more about personal experiences around either observing or experiencing gendered racism in advertising and in corporate America in general.
For me, you brought up anger. I have been taught that anger is a wasted emotion because you can't control it. And as a Black woman, I have to be in control of all of my emotions at any given moment. So anger brings rage, which brings out of control. And I see all of my counterparts, white men, white women, Black men can topple desks, stomp out of rooms. I have to be in control at there is no room for me to be angry. Because it is a nail in my coffin as in a career move. And for me, I've cried more. I'm a veteran, and I've cried more in advertising about my experience to keep my anger in check than I ever did being deployed, serving in the military, in life and death situations. Because I am not allowed, because it's not safe for me to be angry in this industry.
What's underneath anger is sadness. And when anger gets repressed, that's when tears, depression, all of those types of symptoms come, because anger is information. If handled in a way that does not look like rage, or that does not look like any other form of an outburst. But when anger is handled very carefully, if anger gets addressed, it can be very powerful. And that it can really communicate something outside of just rage. Anger can communicate emotions of sadness, of despair, distress, again, if handled well. So when it gets repressed, that's when it turns out to be an outburst or a fit of rage.
And I have come to the conclusion that no one cares when we cry. Black women.
No, because we're always crying. When we're crying, there's some other adjacent group to be crying about.
Yes.
Right? So we can have camaraderie with white women, and we can fight the fight of feminism, and they get pushed to the front, and we're still behind. And we can fight the fight of racism, and we can cry those tears of injustice, and we're still at the back of that, right? We're always, and in a great way, it gives us that empathy and that ability to connect on all fronts. And at the same time, it's like, okay, well then if we're pushing everybody forward, who's behind us pushing us?
It's us pushing each other.
And to your point, Lois, like you said this earlier, don't be a veteran, don't have a disability, don't be LGBTQIA, like if you have another stressor going on, don't be, aging out in this industry. Ageism, is a huge, but you put one more thing on that and it's damn near impossible. I mean, it is a miracle. You look at the history of Black people in this country and women in this country, and it's a damn miracle that the three of us are on this Zoom call right now in 2020, speaking to an audience of people who are listening to us.
And who are opting in to listen. I think that's what gives me hope. And that's what gives me inspiration and inspires me to continue to do the work I do.
I grew up at Harpo, which is a very Black and brown, very female, alpha female energy of like these strong, powerful Black women and strong, powerful women of color and strong, powerful white women. And, some strong white men too, who kind of understood what was going on because of the topics of our conversation every day, because at the end of the day, we were being led by Oprah Winfrey. And, to go from that to move into working for Harpo and going into corporate America was a bit of an unanchoring for me, right? I mean, I feel so fortunate that those were my formative years. And so I think I got to, you know, advertising and thought, oh, this is what everybody's talking about. And you know, it doesn't have to be either or, it can be both. And, you know, I wrote a piece for Adweek back in 2018 about, you know, prioritizing diversity and speaking about how, you know, advertising in essence was built on telling a story through one very specific narrative. And, you know, Tom Burrell, and if anybody in our industry has not read his book Brainwashed, go get it and read it because it's brilliant. But, you know, he famously said that, you know, Black people are not dark skinned like,
No.
you know, back in the 50s, you used to have the Colgate commercial and you'd have the white commercial, and then you'd swap out the actors and you'd have the Black commercial, and it'd be the same exact dialogue and the same exact names. And there was, and that was the extent of the stories and the representation, you know, told. And so I think, you know, and I got a lot of backlash for that article, a lot of backlash saying it's open season on white men and you've done well in this industry, so why would you call it out? And I think there's an awareness now, and this is why this moment is so special right now and unique, why we cannot waste it, because people are seeing that the system can perpetrate a certain agenda, and that you as a person can contribute to that system without believing in what the system is producing.
Right. I think there is a sense of fear where I wish it was more curiosity. No one is saying that we want to matter more, or we're just saying we're in this all together and there's space for everyone.
So, you know, where do you go from here? How do you change the system? How do you start to impact change?
So I think I'd really like to toss it back to our panel and hear the advice that Black women to industry leaders. I think we're very intentional about not sharing names, titles, agencies, because we wanted to have this conversation without constraints and share with you the real, raw feelings of your colleagues and your talent that work and support your business. And here they go.
Hold people accountable within this industry and support women of color.
It's really important to elevate your, Black talent and Black women, both internally and externally, and pay them.
Ask us how you can get better and listen to what we have to say. But remember that one Black woman is not the voice of all Black women.
It's not just about hiring more Black people, which is job number one, but it's giving those people that you hire the opportunities and the support they need to succeed.
In every organization, there are repeat offenders who we know somehow manage to have a problem with the same types of individuals. Those aren't the people that you should want in your organization.
I would recommend that people recognize that the best ideas may come from people who don't look like you, who don't think like you.
You know, it can be really hard to interrogate these things, but start to think about the ways that you perhaps never approved a creative concept that had people who looked different, or storytelling that came from a different POV, or times that you didn't listen to team members because their articulation of an idea wasn't in a way that you think that it should have been said to you.
But it's imperative that we set Black talent up for success by assigning them to teams that really value their talent and perspective.
It's important for companies to have transparency about the level of Black people, the level of Black women, the level of, people in different racial groups that are at a company. There are companies that are really scared to release these numbers, and there's a reason for that because they're so low. If there aren't any Black women in leadership, what are you doing and why?
Don't get in our way. See us and see our value. Diverse leadership will make your business stronger, and it will improve your bottom line. So don't do us a favor, do yourself the favor.
Wow, that was really powerful.
One thing that I want to speak to, that one of the individuals who talked about her experience in advertising and what would help, she talked about support. And at this time, when Jill, as you said, Black women are the most educated population of people. We are, breaking barriers, breaking glass ceilings, and not so much aware of the psychological demands of that experience. And so at this time, for specifically Black female professionals in all fields, but because we're talking about advertising and the women that, give their creative talents to advertising, I do want to encourage, engaging in self a little bit right now, engaging in restorative behaviors that can help Black women continue to fight this fight. Engagement can look like going to therapy, getting support, advocating for oneself, honoring that the elements of strong Black woman schema, the elements of gendered racism can become silencing. So that turns into silencing different indicators of stress, silencing different indicators of boundaries. And so support in therapy, support in community, support in advocating are three areas that I see Black women specifically moving further and further into to help, again, continue creating this change.
It's a tip of the iceberg, but I know my therapist said to me once, all that energy that you're pushing out into the world, turn it around and put it on yourself. And I think, that was really the beginning of a revelation for me.
I agree, Jill. I think for me is, my therapist told me, you're no good if you're in the hospital to anyone. You're no good if you're tired, and you have to take care of yourself first so you can take care of others. And you have to demand it. And if you feel like you're being selfish, it's okay. One thing that my mother taught me, no is an acceptable answer. You don't have to say yes to everything. And that doesn't make you any less of a strong Black woman. It actually probably makes you stronger because you know your limits.
And I also would say that, I feel a degree of privilege being in the point in my career that I'm at where I can say that, right?
Right.
Starting out in this industry is very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
I'm glad you point that out because most Black women or people of color are junior because they get to a roadblock, they hit that transitional period, and most leave because it's not a welcoming, it is a lonely place, and it becomes taxing. Especially in this season right now, I've been talking to a lot of Black talent, and they're like, I'm tired, I'm done, I'm gonna go do something else. It's not worth myself being, it's not worth it anymore. And they're transitioning out of the industry. So it's making it harder to even find talent to fill these roles, to be at the table, because it's been, you do 15 years, it's been so unwelcoming.
Retaining and keeping, the talent, I think is the lesser talked about thing, right? Of really cultivating and investing in your Black talent and your Black female talent. And it just goes to show you how much work that we have to do. As well as how much hope there is.
Because there is change coming. And I am a firm believer, COVID has pushed us to atone for our sins that we have not dealt with as a nation or a country and as a world. And I think it has made us take a real hard stop to fix the things that need to be fixed.
Where we go from here is really up to all of us collectively. There is that thought, and a lot of Black people right now are saying, leave me out of this. And this is a white person problem to fix. And I do think that there's a lot of truth to that. And I also feel an obligation to continue to share stories from Black women, from Black people, and how will we begin to impact change if we don't have a seat at the table? And that there is always, there can always be someone ahead of you that has the opportunity to reach back, Black, white, male, female, and different. And I think, there's that personal responsibility on all of us to do better. Let's just be better, better humans.
When you know better, you do better. So now you know better. So you should.
Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better.
So there's no excuses for anyone not doing better in our industry because we know better. You know better now.
Well, thank you, Dr. Heather, for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh,
You're great.
So, listen, Lois and I knew we needed some therapy for this one. So
have a good night, you all.
Hello and welcome. I'm Rima Elghassain, and I'm the Vice President of Talent Equity and Inclusion at the 4A's Foundation. We are thrilled to be part of the 3% conference this year as we talk to 600 and rising and how one letter and many voices started a movement. If you don't know, the 4A's Foundation is a nonprofit arm which is part of the 4A's, and it drives many of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that support the industry at large, from scholarships and awards, our educational programs, and of course, our multicultural advertising intern program, MAPE. Through MAPE, we have the largest and longest running diversity talent pipeline in the industry with over 3,500 alumni and this year's class of 380 fellows. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Bennett, one of our MAPE alum, and Nathan Young, the two founders of 600 and Rising, a nonprofit organization dedicated to advocating for Black employees at advertising agencies. They're committed to ensuring equal opportunity and pay equity for nearly 3,500 members and still rising, and bringing about a world where Black agency talent can be themselves and thrive. And I'm really excited to say that the 4A's is partnering with 600 and Rising to help make that change. Welcome, Bennett, and welcome, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Rima. We're excited to have a lively conversation.
I can't wait. So let's just start from the beginning, the journey, where you've been, and honestly, why did you feel you needed to start this? Nathan, why don't you go first?
I mean, 2020 is a year of change. You look at everything that's going on right now, everything from COVID to the racial unrest to, the political things that are going on both domestically and internationally. The winds of change are here. And when we saw an opportunity to deliver on the promise of diversity and inclusion that has been promised to Black employees for decades and decades, we wanted to seize the moment. Personally, with the George Floyd murder, he was murdered 4 blocks away from where I live. So that hit super close to home for me. And as I looked at the city of Minneapolis burning, as I smelled the smoke wafting in through the windows, I really kind of looked within and thought about what I could do to make the world better. Reached out to Bennett. We had a Twitter conversation. My original idea was to cut together this fairly graphic video of how much police brutality was happening on the streets. And he's like, why don't we go with something a little bit more positive? And that was the genesis of this open letter. And I'd be lying if I told you that I knew all of this stuff that has happened over the past 60 days would come out of that open letter. But I was hopeful that simply speaking truth to power would grab people's attention, would capture people's hearts, and start to drive some of the conversation that we're starting to see in this industry today.
Wow, that's a great story, and I didn't know all that. So I feel like you and Bennett have this really great relationship where you complement each other. So you had this huge vision, and then Bennett tried to bring it in for you. And so, like, Bennett, tell me how did this start for you? What was it like when you got that call?
That's literally how Nathan and I got connected. And he pitched me that video, and I couldn't get past 20 seconds of it. It was graphic, and like I knew it came from a place that was just like, damn, like my guy's living in Minneapolis. He's clearly going through it. But also, like, what good is this video gonna do? Like, there's so much trauma happening at this moment. So we probably need to be doing something different. And yeah, he reached out and said, hey, what about an open letter? And I said, all right, cool, let's do it.
Yeah. Bennett is very good at playing kumbaya when I'm like coming down with the fire and brimstone, and it's like, hey, take a step back. And that's like, what he did. But the other thing that he's really good at is he is like a master connector. This dude knows everybody. I have no idea how he knows them. I mean, it's probably because he's a journalist and just a general stand-up guy. But, I think, the really powerful dynamic that Bennett and I have is I have an ability to kind of set a good overall strategy. I have the ability to craft policy and letters in a way that is going to land in a specific way. And then Bennett has the insane ability to rally the troops. One of the things, I know we've told the story a couple times, but we'll tell it again because we're at a conference and people love stories. But this all started as a Twitter conversation. He slid into my DMs and we had a conversation, and literally, I think the conversation that we had was like maybe like 20-30 minutes long. It took us 20-30 minutes long to be like, hey man, you good? You eating? You sleeping? Blah, blah, blah. How's things in New York? How things in Minneapolis? Showed him that video. He's like, nah, man. Like, that's it's way too much. And, then I was like, what about an open letter? And he's like, bet down, let's go. And all of a sudden we were just reaching out to, our network of Black professionals who we knew personally. And we had, 30 people to start. And then, those people reached out to their network. And then we had 100. And those people reached out to their network. And we had 200. And, within days of that Twitter conversation, we were drafting, and making revisions to this letter with some of the leading diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals in this industry. Really, really like an incredible kind of sprint. And again, this is why, I love that this issue of diversity, and specifically diversity, equity, and inclusion for Black employees is getting the attention that it's getting right now. But this was not expected. We're just too, like, Bennett and I are not diversity, equity, and inclusion experts. That's another thing that gets missing in the story. We are just two Black guys who have gone through a career in advertising. And it turns out that when you ask 600 Black folks what their experience is, it's remarkably similar. And that was when we kind of knew that we had something, when we were talking to all the folks who wanted to sign on to this letter. And it's just like, does this check all the boxes for you? Does this seem like this is what's wrong with the industry? Unanimous. You never see that. I have a background in strategy and market research. Part of the process for putting this letter together is we sent out a survey. And I think we had something like 180 respondents to the survey. And we had, standard list of statements, strongly disagree to strongly agree. Usually there's a little bit of variance kind of in the answers. Every single statement that we put out there, the only variance was between agree and strongly agree. So
it's powerful.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful moment. I think the question is like kind of now what, right? I think we've raised the profile of the issue. I think that we've created a consensus on, what the way forward is. And certainly we've started to set a standard in terms of the way that we measure diversity and the way that we report out on it. I think the question for us is, now what? And luckily for us, we've had a ton of support, not just from our Black members, but from the thousands of like-minded non-Black allies who have joined our movement, from our board of directors, from our advisory council, and then from our committee members as well. So what started as, kind of this Twitter fever dream of two people has now moved into a movement that thousands of people in the advertising industry are behind. And that's super powerful, and we take the responsibility very seriously.
Yeah, you've been able to do it in 2 months, and time is really complicated during COVID, but it's a lot to do. And you created this collective voice and got this seat at this table, and you're owning it. And like you said, you're building that support. And I think a lot of that support that we can bring at the 4As was our partnership with you. And so why do you even think it was important to partner with the 4As?
Yeah, I'll take it. It feels really personal for me. I'm a MAPE alum, class of 2013. It felt like just a really, really, really like emotional thing for me to say, all right, cool. Like, all right, if we're gonna go into partnership with anybody, let it be, the trade body for these holding companies. Logically, it made sense. We're more we're these independent rabble rousers who can take, a lot of the top dogs in this industry to task. But, the 4As has always been trying to make inroads for talent through programming and conferences, and through a lot of the foundation's programming, whether it be MAPE or the high schools, the 2 advertising high schools in New York, IM and Mecca. Shout out to the students there. They are literally the future of the business. But knowing that I came from, was basically raised in these diversity initiatives, and then end up in an agency that was not prepared for me. Not prepared for all the training I ended up doing. And I suffered in silence for 4 years. It was a frustrating time. And I know that wasn't just my experience. There were so many peers who ended up leaving agency life and going brand side or tech side, partially because it paid better and they felt that, their voice was better valued. And I stuck it out as long as I could, and eventually became a journalist and started covering a lot of the stuff, and realized like how much worse things were for the industry, and how much competition they have from big tech, from from brand side, from like mass media, and these new streaming services especially. So for this group of what is it, 380 Mapers, it's crazy for them to, be probably, they're already the most prepared in the business. Pair that with the whole virtual stuff that they all have to do in this pandemic. Most agency people are like having cabin fever and want to get back in the offices, but these kids can probably work from anywhere, make good money, be good, and then still go through a lot of the same stuff that Nathan and I did. And it's frustrating. Like, it's frustrating knowing that like that has to be like, that is a potential future for them. So, our role at 600 is ensuring that like, this next group of individuals, whether it be from MAPE or through other programs that welcome talent into the business, that they don't go through the buzzsaw that Nathan and I did. He's still there. He's killing it at Periscope. I've stepped aside and am trying to tackle the issue from a different way through content stuff. But yeah, that partnership was super important, both in just like the collecting of the necessary data, but also bring in opportunities to better strengthen the bond between the 4As, its foundation, and the talent that they're meant to support.
Right, and being the connector that you are, as Nathan mentioned, and having that relationship with the 4As. Nathan, like what really excited you about this partnership?
When I look at every successful reform movement in the history of the United States, I see one common theme. It requires, the knowledge of an insider and the objectivity of an outsider. So in this relationship, I really see 4As as holding that inside knowledge. They've really been in close partnership with the leading advertising agencies of America for decades now. And that frees us up to be just the people who keep it real, the people who are keeping a watchful eye on the progress of diversity and inclusion, the people who are coming up with innovative new approaches to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I really like the way that partnership frees us both up to do what we are each uniquely suited to do. And I think that together, that is going to be the combination that allows us to really deliver on the promise of what that open letter kind of set out to do.
I love that. And you mentioned your advisory board, your board, your advisory council, and like really the communities that you're building around you and the programs to really help drive that movement. So you also mentioned 12 points to these agencies, and you've been talking with them and they've been responding in different ways. But 2 months later, what's that extra point you would add?
There's a lot of extra points that we could have added. I think that there were 3 at least that, we kind of cut for brevity because we didn't want to overwhelm anybody. But, before I even get into that, I just want to make the point that we haven't even gotten past step 1 fully yet. There are still holding companies out there, I'm not going to name names, who have not released their diversity data. There are still major advertising agencies who have not taken that first step and committed to change. And, we definitely still welcome them. It's not too late. No time like the present. Come on board. We're here for you. But before we start talking about adding additional steps, I think it's really, really important that we focus in on delivering what I feel like is the most important step, and that's data transparency. And I believe that for really one core reason, and that's you can't change what you can't measure. For so long, advertising agencies have been kind of just putting their heads in the stands when it comes to diversity numbers. They think that it's enough just to have a chief diversity officer, or to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion lead, or to contribute to diversity scholarships or stuff like that. And they pay no attention to how the makeup of their workforce has changed or not changed over the years. I want data to be at the center of everything that we do from here on out, because the proof is in the pudding. If we are truly committing, I don't care if you're committing $30 million, $30,000, or $30 to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I care how much you move the needle in terms of recruiting diverse talent into your agency, training diverse talent within your agency, and promoting diverse talent into senior positions within your agency. That's what matters. And the data is going to tell that story.
Yeah. Let me ask you another question. Based on to that point.
Yeah.
How do you want to partner with the diversity, equity, and inclusion leads to hold these CEOs and agencies accountable to even get past step 1 and then get to the other steps?
I feel like an unintended consequence of just the wave of momentum that helped launch 600 and Rising is the overwhelming amount of pressure just the times have put on the people paid to help solve the problems. Those existing DE&I folks at different agencies, across the U.S. So what we are building 4As and 600 is what's called a Progress to Equity Task Force. A collective of doers who don't hold, who may hold DE&I roles, but is not they're probably like non-traditional roles or just regular roles within the industry, but they're doers. They launch initiatives. They are grassroots movers who have a track record of bringing people together and finding solutions to this, to a lot of these problems. So, that's definitely one part of the conversation. And, I think, I don't think any DE&I person should be scared or feeling nervous to talk to us. We represent Black talent, but we also know that they've been in the weeds doing the work for years, and we want to make sure we support them. So I think hopefully with that initiative and just us letting the industry know, hey, this isn't the DE&I person's problem to solve.
No, I'll go one step further. If you are a diversity, equity, and inclusion lead, if you are a chief diversity officer, if you are just a junior art director trying to make it in this industry and you've got a good idea for how to improve diversity and inclusion, holler at me. Holler at Bennett. Hit us up on LinkedIn, call us, email us. We want everybody who is committed to making substantive change in this industry to come on board with 600 and Rising and help us push for change. Nothing about what we are doing is designed to make people feel left out or, make people feel like they haven't done their jobs. Actually, that's a lie. For some of the CEOs and some of the CDOs, we do feel that way. But for the most part, we are building a broad coalition of people who care about the future of this industry. And anybody who is well-meaning, who is willing to put in the work, who is willing to do the research, and who is willing to commit to change, we welcome them on board the good ship 600 and Rising.
That was a pretty powerful statement right there and a call to action. And you're right, we all have a different role to play. I know my role at the 4A's Foundation and the work that we do. And I know for you both, it's 600 and Rising is really a lot about policy change. And everyone plays a different role, from the 4A's to the D&I leads to the CEOs and just the people that work there. And so it's a lot, but we have to all do it. And right now, like I mentioned, you have this collective voice that you've created, and it's not going silent anytime soon, which is amazing. And people are listening right now to you, not just the agencies, but the 600 and Rising that you represent, right? Those 3,500, some of them are here at 3% conference. Your allies are here at 3% conference. My last question to you is, you've been talking to the agencies so much, but what do you want to say to that collective voice?
Together we rise. It's a cliche, but, sometimes things become old chestnuts for a reason. There is no way that we can accomplish all of the goals that we set out in that open letter, all of the unsaid goals that weren't included in that open letter. There's no way that we can achieve true diversity, equity, and inclusion for all people without a fully committed group of individuals of all races, colors, genders, and creeds coming together and demanding change. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. 600 and Rising, as well as 3% movement, we're up against pretty steep odds. It is important that we come together and fight for diversity and fight for equity together. The future is intersectional, and I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah. It's not lost on me. Like, my last time at 3% conference was when I stepped away from the industry. And I happened to moderate a panel on gratitude. And I remember that whole conversation well. It was super surreal. And I think of this moment also super surreal because we are virtually having this conference. But like, I do want to let everybody know that, to the 600 fam and everybody who has been supporting us, you have my eternal gratitude for supporting us over these last couple of months. It has been insane. It has been crazy. We have learned a lot. We have grown a lot as Black men and budding leaders in this fight. And we look to y'all to challenge us and to hold us accountable, because we do want to make change. We're volunteer led. We have our day jobs, but we signed up and said, hey, we want to be in this fight in this capacity, and we are grateful that you trust in us, and we are grateful to have a board that we trust to help push these policies forward. And we're grateful for partners like the 4A's, people who have shared a platform with us. Y'all didn't have to do that. And it is not lost on me. And, just thank you. And, the work continues. Work continues.
Well, damn, that was 2 pretty powerful statements. And I think we're going to drop the mic there. I don't know what else we could say after that. So I really thank you both to have this really raw, authentic conversation. And, every time I talk to you, you both always bring yourselves to the table, and I try to do that too. So thank you for that. Thanks for the partnership, the work that you're doing, and the opportunity to talk to you about it. And I feel like I got to know you a little bit more than I already do during this conversation. So thank you for your passion and the work. And you made some pretty clear calls out to the industry in different ways. And, it's on them for the next step. So we'll see how it goes.
See how it goes. Thank you so much, Rima.
Thanks.
Yeah, really appreciate you, Rima. Thank you.
At a very young age, we learn to make a distinction between you
and me.
Simple, right? But what if somehow?
What if somehow?
I could see the world from your perspective.
And you could see it from mine. Think for a second.
I know all your hopes and dreams.
E tudo que te incomoda.
और आपको भी वो पता चले मेरे बारे में.
You know what it's like to have a daughter who struggles with, is she black enough? Is she white enough?
You would know what it's like to not have enough confidence to express your ideas.
You'd know what it would be like for people to take your culture and turn it into a theme party.
You would know that every time that you say you have a husband, people pause.
To be gender non-conforming.
To be comfortable being uncomfortable a lot of times.
You know what it's like to lose your little brother to HIV.
You'd know that there is struggle and pain, but also a lot of hope.
And suddenly we would see
that although our lives are very different,
they are also very much the same. And that bigger than you and me
is us.
Novel.
And as us, we know this.
You don't have to look like us.
Worship like us.
Live like us.
Or love like us.
To stand with us. Of course, you'll always be you.
And I'll always be me.
But there's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us.
There's nothing stopping us from becoming us.
Ngote.
Nitsitebi. Kami. Nosotros.
Woman.
Nós.
We're stronger as us. We're stronger as allies.